Studio Ghibli, a beloved Japanese animation studio. They're perhaps most famous for Hayao Miyazaki, the person behind classics such as Spirited Away, My Neighbor Totoro, Ponyo, and Laputa. Hey everyone, I'm Kudojin, and I run a YouTube channel by the same name, where I talk about my life and experiences just growing up, being someone who's lived in Japan and in Hawaii. And I'm gonna be helping Otaku with this video today. I know in the West it's called Castle in the Sky, but people in Japan call it Laputa, and that's what I grew up with, so if you're complaining, screw you!
But if you are a Ghibli fan, not just an anime fan, you will know that Miyazaki isn't the only person who made them what they are today. Ghibli had another director with them who was also behind a number of famous works. His name is Isao Takahata, best known for the dramatic war movie Grave of the Fireflies. He is also director of Pompoko, that film about tanukis, and the tale of Princess Kayuga, the Ghibli version, not the countless other versions there are.
Quite an impressive series of works. But let's go back for a bit. Remember that movie, Grave of the Fireflies? What if I told you there was actually supposed to be sort of a spiritual successor to that? Not quite a sequel, but something to continue the spirit of the movie. But that movie never saw the light of day.
Well, strap on in, because we are going to talk about that lost Ghibli movie.
Now, Grave of the Fireflies was an excellent film, following the story of a teen boy and his younger sister as they try to survive the chaos that was Japan towards the end of World War II, and even after it. It's often lauded as an anti-war film, but Takahata himself was actually adamant that it wasn't an anti-war film. Rather, he maintained the film just told the story of a brother and sister living a failed life because of isolation. The film itself only gives you the bare minimum background of what's needed to understand the plot and nothing else. The whole film is focused solely on the two siblings, and it's a tragic film. If you haven't seen it yet, I recommend you go watch it. Maybe not right now, after the video. So, Takahata wanted to make sort of a follow-up, something to keep the spirit of the film going, but what could possibly accomplish that?
Well, Takahata came up with The Border 1939 based on The Border, which is a trilogy of novels written by Shin Shikata. The film would start in Seoul, which the Japanese called Kijio, in the year 1939.
Before we talk about the plot, some historic context. After Japan defeated Russia in the Russo-Japanese War, they made Korea a protectorate for a few years before fully annexing it. During this time, it wasn't exactly nice to be a Korean living in Japan, and that's putting it mildly. Korean culture was suppressed, and so was the language. At one point, Koreans were even forced to adopt Japanese names. And this was all before the war. We haven't even gotten to some of the worst stuff that happened during the war, like comfort women.
Later on, the Japanese military would gain much more power, going so far to invade Manchuria on a fabricated pretext without the approval of civilian government in Tokyo. This led to Japan occupying the region and setting up the puppet regime of Manchukuo.
Now, there's much more to this history, but if I went into all of this video would be about 1 or 2 hours long. If you want to know more about it, I would highly recommend watching the series about Japanese militarism by Extra History.
This is the backdrop. The film takes place in Korea, ruled by Japan. Manchuria is occupied. East Asia is living through this reality.
The film's protagonist is Akio. He's an ethnically Japanese university student, but born and raised in Korea. He's largely been insulated from the worst of Japan's crime because of his heritage, and he's surprised when he learns one of his friends, Nobuhiko, who supposedly died while at a military academy in Manchuria, turns out to be alive.
He goes there. He goes to Manchuria to find Nobuhiko, and that's when he learns his friends had joined an anti-Japanese resistance group. What's more, he learns that while his friends has been raised by Japanese family, is ethically Mongol and identifies more their native population.
But Akio's actions have been noticed by the secret police. They arrest and torture Akio, but the resistance group comes to his rescue, in spite of the distrust they have due to Akio's heritage. In order to prove his loyalty, Akio agrees to help them out with something else. Akiko, another Mongol, needs to go back to her homeland, and Akio becomes her escort.
From there, they make their way to Mongolia running from bandits and the secret police who tries to catch them. Eventually, they reach Mongolia, but the journey has brought the two close and they have a tearful goodbye. That's where the film ends. This was the story of realization and of learning the truth about history. Takahata especially wanted to address two things.
First, with Japan becoming one of the largest economies in the world, he felt Japan was at risk of repeating its past mistakes. Coming to terms with its World War II history is something that's been a struggle for Japan. None of this is helped by the right-wing nationalist and far-right groups in Japan that try to downplay, deny, or even rewrite history. All the while, the average person in Japan just wants to move on from this. There's a lot more I can tell you about this from personal experience having lived in Japan, but that would add about another hour to this video, so if I address it, it'll have to be in a separate video.
Second, Takahata wanted to explore the perspective of a Japanese person living there, to look at the perspective of someone who was closer to occupiers than the occupied. The film proposal was completed in mid-April 1989 and the first thing seemed to be okay, but then everything changed because of one event in Beijing. Around the same time that the proposal was finished, protesters gathered in the Beijing's Tiananmen Square that demanded freedom and democracy. But they were not explicitly anti-communist. The Chinese government responded to this on June 3rd by sending in the army. We don't know how many people died that day, and we probably never will because the CCP has banned all the discussion about this in China.
After this, the film was cancelled. Takahata himself doesn't actually speak much about the cancellation of the film. He's only on record as saying it was because of Tiananmen Square. But we can actually learn a little bit more about what's going on by looking at the author of the book the movie's based on, Shin Shikata. The third and final installment of his novel trilogy was released in 1989, but it was not without issues. After the massacre at Tiananmen Square, the distributor contacted Shin and told him that they wanted to cancel their order. The reason? Quote, because after that incident, Japanese opinion of China has gone down, and we no longer have confidence it will sell. This shocked Shin Shikata and made him more determined to finish his novels. To quote him, "The reason I was so driven was because after being told about that research, I imagined the response from the average Japanese person. The Chinese army did such horrific things too. Now everything's even. It's all over. Let's not talk about the crime of invaders or history anymore." We can probably bet that Takahata was told the same thing Shin Shikata was, and probably felt something similar to Shin. But with film, it's a lot harder to push something through when the publishers and distributors won't take it. And because of this, the film wouldn't ever be made. The only thing we know of that's left is the Kikakusho, or the planning document. And the planning document isn't available to the general public. But at the very least, it does still exist.
But that doesn't have to be where we stop. You see, while the film was cancelled, the novels did come out. The third installment was released in 1989. And all the three were bundled together into a single book in 1995. So Akio's story actually continues. The second novel takes place in 1943. Akio, now a civilian working for Japanese military manufacturing weapons, now spends more time with the Koreans after witnessing Japanese brutality firsthand. He fully commits himself to supporting the Korean independence movement. Along the way, he reunites with Nobuhiko and Akiko. The third and the final novel finishes the story on the 15th of August 1945. Japan has surrendered and now Akio can finally end this fight.
And thanks for watching this video. I hope that you liked it, and if you did, like this video and subscribe to me and Otaku's channel. And until the next video, sayonara!
And yep, that is all for today. Videos like these takes much more time, research and efforts. Thanks for Kudojin helping me out with this video. It couldn't have been possible without Kudo. So make sure you visit his channel and subscribe to As an Otaku, hit the bell icon. Share this video with your friends and I'll be taking my leave. So yeah, thanks for watching this video.